In the Victorian era, forget everything you've seen in romantic movies. Dating simply didn't exist. What people had instead was courtship, a slow process, closely supervised and full of rules that would make any lawyer proud. And the goal? Marriage. Period. Now, how did people actually flirt without ruining their reputation? Watch until the end to find out. Subscribe to the channel for more Victorian-era content. In the Victorian era, a single man and a single woman were never alone together in a room. It sounds like an exaggeration, but it wasn't. A young woman's reputation depended entirely on appearances. A simple rumor that she spent 5 minutes alone with someone could ruin her chances of marriage forever. That's why there was the chaperone, usually an aunt or an older woman who went with the young woman to any meeting. She stayed there, watchful, making sure nothing improper happened. In practice, she protected the family from scandals and kept men with bad intentions away. The curious thing is that many couples came up with secret codes using fans and flowers to communicate right under the chaperone's nose. In the Victorian era, if you wanted to meet a young lady, you had to go through the ritual of formal visits. The suitor would sit in her family's parlor, always with her mother or an aunt right there, pretending to sew or read, but really watching every word. The conversation stayed basic: music, the weather outside, maybe a little card game. No being alone with her. This system had a pretty name: paying calls. But it worked like a filter. The family would size up whether the guy had money, social standing, and serious intentions. Romance? That came later, if it came at all. It was less about love and more about negotiation. Entering someone's home was almost a military operation. There was a system that worked like this. Families would announce specific days and times when they would be at home to receive visitors. Outside that window, you simply weren't welcome. Showed up at the wrong time? The butler would take your calling card and politely say the family wasn't available. In practice, it was a sophisticated social filter. If the lady of the house didn't want to see you, all she had to do was never be at home when you showed up. No one had to say no directly. The system did the dirty work. It was rejection with kid gloves. And there's more. Visits were timed. 15 minutes was the standard. Staying longer than that without an invitation was considered an intrusion. Knocking on someone's door without warning was considered a serious breach of manners. There was a whole etiquette system based on calling cards. It worked like this. You left your card with the butler, who handed it to the homeowner. If the person wanted to meet you, they sent a card back. Only then could you make a formal visit. It was basically the LinkedIn of the time. Without that exchange of cards, you simply didn't exist to high society. Folding the corner of the card meant you came in person. Leaving it unfolded indicated that a servant delivered it for you. Women had even stricter rules and could only visit other women at specific hours. A system that today seems absurd, but that completely controlled who did or didn't get into social circles. The ballroom was one of the few places where a man could approach a woman without starting gossip. But don't think it was that simple. There was a strict code that everyone followed. The gentleman had to be formally introduced before asking for a dance, and the lady had the right to refuse. But if she said no to one man and then said yes to another during the same song, her reputation would be ruined. The hosts kept an eye on everything. A waltz was considered more intimate because the couple stayed close, so young ladies could only dance a waltz after being officially introduced to society. It was a social chess game where one wrong step could ruin entire families. A handshake could ruin a reputation. In the Victorian era, you didn't just walk up and start talking to someone. It sounds weird, but that's how it worked. Without a formal introduction made by a third party, you basically didn't exist socially to that person. Picture the scene. You're in a crowded ballroom, you spot someone interesting, but you can't just go over and talk to them. You have to find someone who knows both of you and can make the connection. Without that, any attempt to approach was seen as intrusive. And the problem didn't stop there. Anyone who broke that rule became gossip fast. Victorians took etiquette seriously, and a slip-up like that could stain your name for years. Society had a long memory and a sharp tongue. If you showed direct interest and things didn't work out, that was it. You'd get labeled as easy or classless. And back then, a tarnished reputation meant fewer invitations to dances, fewer visits at home, and, in the end, fewer chances of finding a good match. It was a game of patience where one wrong move could be costly. Before 1840, sending a letter cost a fortune, sometimes the equivalent of a day's wages. Then the uniform penny post came along and changed everything. All of a sudden, anyone could send a letter for just a penny. The result? A boom in romantic correspondence. Couples separated by distance could finally trade words of love without breaking the bank. But there was one serious problem: zero privacy. Nosy servants, meddling relatives, even mail carriers. Anyone could intercept those letters. A lot of people came up with secret codes and encrypted language to protect their most intimate messages. Technology created a new space for privacy, but a guarantee of that privacy? That was still a long way off. In the Victorian era, not every Valentine's Day card came with love. The so-called vinegar valentines were anonymous messages sent to insult people. Folks used these cards to criticize neighbors, co-workers, or rejected suitors. The attacks went after the recipient's looks, social behavior, and even their economic class. The British Postal Service handled thousands of these messages every February. In some years, mail carriers refused to deliver them because they considered the content too offensive. It was basically the cyberbullying of the time, just through the mail and with elaborate illustrations. Saying "I love you" in public was considered vulgar. The solution? Flowers. Each one carried a secret meaning. A bouquet of red roses declared passion, yellow chrysanthemums, rejection. Floriography manuals sold thousands of copies, teaching people how to put messages together. Young people traded bouquets like coded letters. A gentleman could propose marriage, apologize, or even end a relationship, all without saying a word. The position of the flower mattered too. Handed over upside down, the meaning was reversed. It was a sophisticated communication system in a society where talking about feelings was taboo. Love letters carried hidden secrets. Flowers pressed between the pages had specific meanings. A red rose declared passion, while a violet promised loyalty. Perfume sprayed on the paper allowed the recipient to feel the beloved. Locks of hair were sent as proof of a serious commitment. In a time when young couples could barely be alone in a room, these objects created an intimacy that social rules forbade. The most curious part? Many families kept these letters for generations, and today historians use them to understand how people really loved, very different from the cold image that books usually show of that society. Couples couldn't just go out together. There was walking out, a public stroll that worked like a compatibility test. The idea was simple. Walking side by side made it possible to talk without the pressure of being in an enclosed setting, but with enough witnesses to keep everything within social rules. For the working class, who didn't have elegant living rooms, the street became the stage for romance. The man had to ask the parents' permission beforehand, and the route followed familiar paths around the neighborhood. If the couple was seen together several times, the community already understood. A serious relationship was on the way. It was courtship in practice, the budget version. Parks and drawing rooms weren't innocent places for fun. They were stages where families showed off their daughters like luxury goods. Every walk, every conversation, every look had a calculated purpose. Parents watched potential suitors, weighed fortunes, and judged connections. And all of it happened under strict rules that no one dared to break. One slip in public could ruin a young woman's reputation forever. What looked like a simple social gathering was, in fact, a game of chess where the prize was the future of an entire family. Breaking off an engagement could land you in court. That's right. If you promised to marry someone and then backed out, the person who got rejected could sue you for breach of promise. And it was no joke. Juries awarded hefty payouts, especially when women were the ones harmed. The reasoning was simple. A young woman who'd been left had her reputation damaged and her chances of a good marriage ruined. Lawyers brought love letters to court as evidence, and newspapers published the most intimate details of the cases. For many men at the time, a marriage proposal was almost as binding as a business contract, and backing out could cost a fortune. In the Victorian era, a promise to marry wasn't just empty talk. It was a verbal contract that changed everything in a woman's life. When a man asked for a young woman's hand, she stopped entertaining other suitors. The family started spending money on her trousseau. Sometimes she even quit a job or turned down other offers. If the guy backed out later, the damage was done. Her reputation was stained. Her chances of getting another marriage proposal dropped fast. And back then, marriage was basically the only retirement plan a woman had. That's why courts took these cases seriously. It wasn't drama, it was measurable financial harm. Lawyers would show receipts for dresses, love letters as evidence, and juries would decide how much a broken promise was worth. Here's something history books often leave out. Victorian dating depended entirely on how much money your family had. For the elite, meeting someone was a controlled process. Balls, formal dinners, always with someone watching. A look that lingered a little too long already sparked comments. The family's reputation was on the line with every meeting. For the working class, though, it was a different story. Men and women met in factories, on the streets, in pubs. Fewer rules, more freedom, but also less of a safety net. If something went wrong, the woman faced the consequences on her own. Neither world was perfect. One had too much surveillance, the other too little protection. Marriage was business, literally. Before any flirting, the families had already checked bank accounts, properties, and reputation. Courtship followed strict rules. Dates only with a chaperone, talking about feelings was frowned upon, and love letters needed approval. Parents traded financial information like they were closing a deal. A girl without a dowry faced an uncertain future, no matter her beauty or intelligence. Men figured out whether the bride would bring land or useful connections. Love? It might even show up later, but nobody was betting on it. Marriage guaranteed social and economic stability for both families. Feelings came second, when they came at all. No final 2 años 1800, getting married became a business. Literally. Matchmaking agencies started popping up in London and other big cities, promising to find you the perfect match for a fee. And it wasn't cheap. The ads filled the newspapers, offering everything from widowers with property to young women of good reputation. The funny thing is that Victorian society, so obsessed with morals and decency, treated love like a business deal without blinking. Families calculated dowries, weighed inheritances, and negotiated alliances like they were land contracts. Romance existed, sure, but it came after the financial agreement. For a lot of people back then, marriage was the most important financial decision of their lives. All it took was one slip to destroy a woman's reputation. A man seen leaving a brothel? Just a worldly gentleman. But if a young woman was caught alone with a suitor for 5 minutes, she was ruined. Society ran on double standards. Rumors came out of nowhere. A letter read out loud, a visit without a chaperone, a lingering look at the ball. For men, those stories became trophies. For women, a social sentence. Whole families could lose invitations, business deals, and alliances because of a talked-about daughter. Victorian courtship worked like this. He played with a stacked deck. She bet her whole life on a single hand. Flirting was almost a military operation. Strict rules banned direct conversations between single men and women. But people always find a way, right? Secret letters were passed from hand to hand. By chance, meetings in parks were carefully planned. Fans had codes. Open meant interest. Closed meant rejection. Relatives looked the other way and created opportunities. The problem? If a woman was caught, her reputation was over. No exaggeration. In that society, a rumor ruined her chances of marriage, social standing, everything. Men got off scot-free. The rules of the game were clear. Take the risk, but don't get caught. In the Victorian era, dating was a family business. No exceptions. A man couldn't even talk to a young woman without prior approval. Chaperones watched every word. Love letters? They went to her mother first. The goal was never happiness. It was to protect property and avoid scandal. Funny thing, we swapped chaperones for social media, but the surveillance is still there. Which of these facts shocked you the most, and which do you think still exists today, just disguised? Drop a comment below. And if you want more real stories without the romanticized version, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. In the next video, we're going to open up another side of that era that almost nobody talks about.